Hey, I'm Kalash, and I make cool stuff. I'm starting off by making an armature with foil and wire. I was working on this project for quite a while, just to realize that by the end, a lot of my video files are missing or corrupted. I really like the sculpture though, so I wanted to make a video anyway, and there will be a few big progress jumps in the footage. I covered the armature with Sculpey Bacon Bond, or now it's just called Oven Baked Clay Adhesive, but that's not something I want to pronounce all the time. And I covered it with a thin layer of Polymer clay. That footage is missing, but I baked it before adding more clay. This way I have a solid base to work on, and it makes sculpting easier for me because nothing is moving around. I also added more wire and foil for his shoulders. I made his teeth with translucent clay, baked them, and stuck them into his face. I'm going to be removing them before baking, but I'm keeping them in throughout the sculpting process so everything fits nicely. I shaped his gums a bit and added details to the top part of his mouth. The side of his face got carved out before adding more strips of clay to make it look more fleshy. I also added bigger strips that I think they're called tendons. Then I roughed them up a bit and also added texture inside the mouth. There's a lot of missing footage here, so I made a little recreation of how I sculpted the eyes. I first carved out the shape that I wanted the eyes to be and added more clay around the edges. And then smoothed everything together. I also added more wire to the base to make the armature longer. Once again, I made the sculpture much bigger than expected, using a lot more clay and time for it. I added more clay to make a part of his shoulders and chest muscles. To make him look like he's kind of in the middle of changing bodies, I detailed his chest area in a way that will later connect to the base. I gave his shoulders ridges, but I might have made them just a tiny bit too deep. I'm using a piece of foam to give his body some texture. It's hard to see on my camera, but it creates a nice skin-like texture. And I used a toothbrush to add little dots around his mouth. Then I plucked out all of his teeth and started working on his tongue. It has wire inside for stability. When that was done, I added it into his mouth. To make the sculpture more stable, I glued it on a wooden disc. I also covered it with clay and baked it before adding more clay on top. This clay got shaped in a similar way to the chest to tie it all together. I covered some wires with clay and attached them to the chest and base. They are evenly thick here, but I added more clay later to make them more bumpy and uneven. After the final bake, I covered him in a mix of black and dark blue acrylic paint. His tongue and mouth got painted in a dark red. I also went over the veins next to his mouth with the same red. The eyeballs got a layer of gray and then white. I didn't like how white they turned out, so later I made them a bit darker again. Then I glued in the teeth with 2-part epoxy glue. I went over them with yellow paint and then water to fade the paint out and make them look stained. And then once again with a darker brown paint. I went over his mouth with a gloss varnish. Then I decided he's looking a bit too blue, so I went over everything with a black wash. To highlight the raised parts, I went over them with a lighter gray. I debated for long, but finally decided to glaze his whole body to give him that slimy look. Then I went over his eyes with UV resin to make them nice and glossy. I also added UV resin to his mouth to make him look like he's salivating. And that's it. As always, a big shout out to my wonderful patrons for their support, and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!